And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Good afternoon. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowen with your Alaska Marine Forecast. We'll start off taking a look at ice across the Bering Sea. The ice edge currently extends down to the Pribilofs. However, lower concentration ice is growing across the region as we move into springtime. Taking a look at our tonight's weather, you can see we have a low pressure center that's moved up into the interior. Still some unsettled weather lingering across much of the northern Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. Winds remain fairly light though. Our next system here south of the central Aleutians is going to be moving east towards the Gulf of Alaska over the next couple of days, strengthening as it does so. We do expect the gradient to tighten up and winds to become more of a factor, especially as we get later into Saturday and Sunday. You can see that by Sunday our low is down to 988 millibars, so some fairly strong winds expected across the eastern Aleutians and again across portions of the northern Gulf of Alaska and starting to get into the northern Panhandle as well. Taking a look at our marine forecast for Saturday, you can see fairly light winds across the area for southeast. 15 to 20 knots or so is what we're looking at from generally Yakutat to Sitka, with down to 10 knots farther south from that. Seas generally 6 to 8 feet in the offshore areas, 2 to 4 feet or so in the inshore areas. And then by Sunday, our low does begin to approach the area, so much stronger winds in the offshore areas, especially west of Yakutat, up to 30 to 40 knots. Seas increasing about 8 to 12 feet in those offshore areas and still about 3 to 5 feet for the inshore areas. Saturday again across the Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound areas, winds generally pretty light and variable, 10 to 15 knots in most areas. And then by Sunday again, much stronger winds expected as that low rapidly deepens. 45 to 50 knots is what we're looking at south of Seward. And south of the Kenai Peninsula, seas approaching 20 feet in these areas. Cook Inlet, winds out of the north around 30 knots or so, seas kicking up to about 7 to 10 feet. And then as we look into Prince William Sound, winds generally going to be out of the east at 30 knots with seas up to about 7 feet. And then across southwestern Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula, looking at about 10 to 15 knots in most areas for Saturday. So fairly light and variable, seas about 3 to 5 feet in most areas. And then by Sunday, again with the low moving off near Kodiak Island, we do see some intensification here. Winds are generally going to be out of the north to northwest on the west side of this system, so seas kicking up to about 15 feet or so for many areas here, winds 30 to 40 knots. And then for Saturday across the western and central and western Aleutians, we're looking at winds out of the north around 30 knots or so. The strongest winds and highest seas are going to be between Nikolsky and Atka, with seas up to about 8 to 10 feet in that area. And then for Sunday again with some intensification with winds out of the north here, looking at about 30 to 40 knots out of the north-northwest and seas approaching 10 to 14 feet. And then Saturday's forecast across the eastern Bering Sea. Most of this is ice covered. Most of the open water is going to be across Bristol Bay. Winds about 10 to 15 knots out of the north with 2 to 3 foot seas. And very similar for Sunday, just with the wind direction. Winds do pick up a little bit though, around 30 knots or so. Seas increasing up to about 5 feet. And then across the north slope, we're looking at winds generally hanging out around 30 knots or so out of the east. Most of this is ice covered, but those lower concentration areas of ice are growing, and they will continue to grow with these stronger winds. Sunday does have a little bit of a decrease in the winds, 20 to 25 knots or so across the area, and winds still out of the east. And that'll wrap up our marine forecast. I'm meteorologist John Cowen.